Hi, this is Ryan Zell, and I want to wish everybody a happy Hanukkah, which is a Jewish feast celebrated by all Jews all around the world. The word Hanukkah means dedication in Hebrew. This feast goes by several different names, such as the Festival of Lights or the Feast of the Dedication. Nobody doubts Jesus kept the law perfectly. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Jesus was circumcised on the 8th day according to the law. He celebrated all the 7 major feasts of the Jewish people: Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Feast of Tabernacles, Hanukkah, Passover, unleavened bread, and Pentecost. If Jesus kept the law perfectly, then he celebrated each and every one of the major and minor Jewish feasts. One feast in particular is very significant for us today. That is the Feast of Hanukkah, also known as the Dedication of Lights. What will follow will be a Jewish history of Hanukkah, found at reformjudaism.org. Unlike many Jewish holidays, Hanukkah, also known as the Festival of Lights, is not mentioned in the Bible. The historical events upon which the celebration is based are recorded in Maccabees 1 and 2, 2 books contained within a later collection of writings known as the Apocrypha. In the year 1868 BC, the Syrian king Antiochus Epiphanes sent his soldiers to Jerusalem. The Syrians desecrated the temple, the holiest place for Jews at that time. Antiochus also abolished Judaism, outlawing the observance of Shabbat and the festivals as well as circumcision. Altars and idols were set up for the worship of Greek gods, and he offered Jews 2 options: conversion or death. On the 25th day of the Hebrew month Kislev in 168 BC, the temple was renamed for the Greek god Zeus. A Jewish resistance movement led by a priestly family known as the Hasmoneans or Maccabees developed against the cruelty of Antiochus. The head of the family was Matthias, an elderly man. His son Judah became the chief strategist and military leader of the resistance. Though outnumbered, Judah Maccabee and his fighters miraculously won 2 major battles, routing the Syrians decisively. Hanukkah, which means dedication, is the festival that commemorates the purification and rededication of the temple following the Greek occupation of that holy place. Today, the holiday reminds Jews to rededicate themselves to keeping alive the flame of Jewish religion, culture, and peoplehood so that it may be passed on to the next generation. As I mentioned, this I read on reformjudaism.org, which is a Jewish website. It correctly states that the events of Hanukkah do not occur in the Old Testament, but it does appear in the books of Maccabees 1 and 2. But there is also one other source that the Feast of Hanukkah does appear at the time of Jesus. John 10:22-24. Then came the festival of dedication at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus was in the temple courts walking in Solomon's Colonnade. The Jews who were there gathered around him saying, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." Jesus Christ celebrated all the Jewish feasts as a devout Jew. The Holy Family were observant Jews, as attested to in the Gospel of Luke, circumcising Jesus on the 8th day, going to the temple to consecrate him to the Lord, and also we see them going up to Jerusalem to observe the Passover. In John, we see 6 of the 7 major feasts of the Jews being observed, with the unnamed one being alluded to between 2 known feasts. The Book of Maccabees is the backdrop for the Jewish festival of Hanukkah. At the time of Jesus, there were only 2 known sources where we find mention of the Feast of Hanukkah. They are in Maccabees 1 and in John 10:22. The Second Temple Jews were very familiar with the festival of Hanukkah and all knew their history very well. They observed this festival in the hope that they would be freed of their current oppressors, the hated pagan Roman Empire. The Jews were also awaiting a new exodus they believed the Messiah would bring about by the redemption of Israel. So we can see that the dedication of lights was a very important feast for the Jews. Luther removes the books of Maccabees from the canon of the Old Testament. Now, let's put this into its proper perspective. Jesus Christ, who kept the law perfectly, was sinless and was God, the second person of the Blessed Trinity, who knows all the events of history and every book of the Jewish canon. Why would Jesus celebrate Hanukkah if the books of Maccabees are false? Jesus observed the festival of dedication in the same temple that the Book of Maccabees writes about in the liberation from the Greek tyrant Antiochus Epiphanes. Jesus does not pick and choose what to believe in Old Testament scriptures. The nation of Israel all read the Book of Maccabees as devout Jews since they celebrated Hanukkah then as well as they do today. If that book was good enough for Jesus and good enough for the Jews and good enough for the Jews even today, then it's good enough for me to believe what's written in that book. The nation of Israel all read the Book of Maccabees as devout Jews. The desecration of the temple and its restoration were recognized by the Jews by the singular miracle of the oil lasting 8 days. By the way, we observe the 8th day as the Lord's Day, who restored the kingdom of God. If Jesus Christ, the one person that kept the entire law perfectly, also including observing all Jewish feasts as required by God, and the only mention of one of those feasts is in the Book of Maccabees, then Jesus Christ has given that book his divine authority. And this feast is mentioned in the New Testament of John 10:22. Then we must pay attention to its contents as well. Luther removed the books of Maccabee from the canon of the Old Testament. Have you ever asked yourself why? Because this book goes against many of the doctrines Luther created at the Reformation. The Book of Maccabees has been given divine authority by Jesus Christ himself, and its contents were believed by the Jews. But since the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection, the Book of Maccabees was removed by them after the temple was destroyed. It suggested you do some research and find out why the Jews or the Sadducees removed the books of Maccabees, which contain the only reference to the dedication of lights, which they have observed for the past 2,200 years after the event, but it is not in their canon. The result will surprise you. Blessings to all, and please subscribe and your comments will be addressed. Blessings to all.